Rob, the autonomy economy continues to expand and grow. This week, we got really interesting signals in the humanoids markets, the delivery markets, and licensing. That's right, licensing is back in play. And a huge thank you to KPMG for being a wonderful sponsor for Autonomy Signals. They make this possible. Omega powers it, and they make it possible. So thank you so much for that. Rob, let's go through the signals that Omega has broken down this week for us. The first signal is Figure signs an agreement with Catalyst Brands to deploy its humanoid robots with JCPenney at their Reno, Nevada warehouse. That's really interesting there. Second signal Omega uncovered, Wayve secures a contract to integrate its mapless, LiDAR-less, end-to-end neural network driving technology into U.S. Stellantis vehicles by 2028. And Starship Technologies passes 10 million autonomous deliveries for their robots. Starship's back. The Skype guys just kept going. Let's start with signal one here. Figure signs the deal with Catalyst. What do we know about that?
This is huge. This was just announced the other day. It's fascinating to see the progress at which humanoids and in particular Figure AI is moving. So Catalyst Brands and humanoid robotics company Figure AI announced a commercial partnership beginning in its initial phase at, as you mentioned, Catalyst Brands Reno, Nevada Distribution Logistics Center. This partnership marks a strategic investment in automation technology that is designed to enhance the supply chain efficiency and support the operational scalability across the Catalyst Brands portfolio. And for those who may not know, those brands include JCPenney, Aeropostale, Brooks Brothers, Lucky Brand, and Nautica, among others. So from the news release and press release yesterday, the companies aim to automate repetitive, physically demanding sorting and packing tasks, thereby freeing associates to focus on higher skill functions. So Figure's next generation humanoid will first focus on aiding associates in the facility's Joey pouch sorting system, which is a sequencing, state-of-the-art, computerized sorting and packaging system that they've newly enhanced its Reno facility with. That was a $40 million infrastructure update 2 years ago. The agreement allows for quick scalability, which provides Catalyst Brands with the optionality to align with business growth and manage seasonality in the years to come. According to Brett Adcock, founder and CEO of Figure, he was quoted as saying, as Catalyst Brands scales its multi-brand portfolio, Figure's humanoids provide a standardized labor solution that can be deployed across diverse industries instantly. So in essence, what he's saying is that this collaboration establishes the playbook for how AI-driven hardware can serve as a primary growth engine for modern holding companies like Catalyst Brands. The last thing that was noted in the press releases yesterday, this marks the first agreement between Figure and a portfolio company of Brookfield, a leading global investment firm, which now holds significant positions in both Figure and Catalyst.
A lot of interesting things to unpack there, but I'm a kid at heart, and you know this. Those brands, Nautica, Lucky Brand, Aeropostale, Brooks Brothers, it sounds like a 1990s movie at the mall. We're going to channel Kevin Smith in Mallrats. I don't know any other way to describe that there. And so that's fascinating. It's like the rebirth of the mall, as we saw years ago when a lot of malls started to become distribution centers, and we kind of called the Amazon effect of mall. And Brookfield's interesting because the Canadians now own Nordstrom's. And they own Saks. And so perhaps that we can see an expansion there. It seems that what Brett and the team at Figure are doing, they're saying, hey, wait a second, there's a big opportunity in the industrial logistics for us. But no, we're not going to go try and move giant pallets. We're going to sit there and we're going to sort stuff. And we've been seeing Figure put videos out. It seems that Figure's carving out this little niche that we could assume could become highly profitable for the company.
100%. And as you were mentioning all the mall stores, I kept thinking about Spencer Gifts, where I would always spend all my time and money. But man, yeah, it's really fascinating to see how Figure AI is kind of attacking this particular niche, right? As you mentioned, this isn't as much about industrial warehouse automation, right? This isn't moving pallets and putting things up on shelves. This is Figure AI kind of trying to integrate itself directly into this existing Joey pouch sorting system that Catalyst Brands offers. And it is trying with this, I believe, to prove that its hardware and perception stack can serve as a quote unquote kind of drop-in flexible labor without requiring massive capital intensive overhaul of existing warehouse infrastructure that we sometimes see in these so-called dark factories. Um, and thus, it's also trying to be cognizant of the human factor, right? This press release is very clear and very upfront that in putting the figure humanoids into this Joey pouch sorting system, it is not replacing human workers. It is allowing the human workers that would normally be in those sorting lines to transition into higher value functions while providing Catalyst a flexible automation buffer against retail seasonality. And so I think it's very interesting what Figure is doing here because it is not what one would assume at first glance, right? This is a very specialized kind of drop-in labor work that's not requiring a ton of modification. It is literally kind of plug and play. And so this is going to be really interesting to see how much of a benefit that Catalyst Brands sees from this type of use of humanoids.
It's a positive because if you look at the historical data from warehouse, there's very high turnover, very similar to the podcast that we recently put out with RC mowers and landscaping industry. It's high turnover where automation then could fill that in. So there's a positive there. As this partnership commercializes and scales, what are some of the signals Omega's uncovered for what we need to watch?
A couple of things that Omega has highlighted for us in particular is to look at Figure's own deployment hiring patterns around logistics engineers, commissioning staff, site support, to see if that growth at Figure mirrors kind of growth of this augmentation model, so to speak, rather than mass substitution model. Another thing to watch are WARN notices or union grievances tied to the Figure Catalyst deployments, which could give us a signal about whether or not this approach to augmenting services and augmenting the workforce to move to higher function capabilities is really occurring rather than what some may fear as a displacement narrative. And so those are a couple things that Omega signals to us to watch. And then lastly, in terms of the actual deployment and measuring its success, Omega has high conviction that manufacturing is not the failure mode for this Catalyst deployment to watch. If the timeline slips here in terms of how many Figure humanoids are on the Joey pouch sorting system line, Omega is telling us that the cause will more than likely be either software generalization gaps or customer integration friction, not actuator supply or factory throughput. So I think those are a couple of really good things for us to monitor as this actual deployment and agreement moves forward.
It's a lot of good stuff to watch. And Omega's highlighted some really interesting risks, which I want to break down here. The Brookfield factor. It's saying they're an investor on both sides of the table. Perhaps they could allow some slippage, and it's really not a market validation of this technology. What do you make of that risk Omega's highlighting?
Yeah, right. To be clear, right? Brookfield Asset Management holds foundational equity stakes in both Figure, having participated in their Series C fundraise, and in Catalyst Brands. So this intra-portfolio transaction creates a captive customer dynamic. Catalyst may act as a highly accommodating partner, tolerating hardware failures or throughput bottlenecks that an independent enterprise would reject. And if Figure's humanoids fail to deliver the expected ROI here, this could pose a real issue for Brookfield. it would absorb losses on both sides, both from its investment in Catalyst and its investment in Figure. And thus, this gives Brookfield an incentive to declare success with this pilot or commercial agreement. It's not a pilot, commercial agreement, regardless of the operational reality.
You have that, and then another risk Omega's highlighted: if Figure cannot keep up with the soaring demand, again, we don't have actual data on this, that $40 million investment could go to waste. That's another interesting thing to look for there.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some technical risks here for sure, right? And part of it will be difficult to judge without more information being voluntarily disclosed by both Figure and Catalyst. But our understanding from the research we've done and that Omega has supplemented with us is that this Reno facility, where the initial deployments of humanoids are going to occur, operates on a strict kind of units per hour metrics. And general purpose humanoids at times can struggle to match the fluid speed of fixed path automation. So if these Figure units can't maintain the rhythm of the joy pouch system or dynamically handle varied retail SKUs without constant recalibration, they risk bottlenecking a $40 million infrastructure investment that has been put into this Reno facility during peak seasonal surges. So it'll be fascinating, given how these two risks that we've identified, or Omega's identified for us, how they interplay, which is there is an incentive for Brookfield to declare success, but yet there are real operational and technical risks here that dovetail with that financial fragility mentioned in risk one.
And hopefully, as this program evolves, and we wish it success, Brookfield's publicly traded, so hopefully we get some clarity on what's happening with Brookfield's overall plans are for automation autonomy. Well, Figure is not yet publicly traded. Perhaps we can get some disclosures to Brookfield, so we'll have to see that. Another risk that Omega has highlighted, and again, we do not have any institutional concrete data for this, is that what percentage or what is the teleop rate? I think that as humanoids scale, there needs to be more data transparency around truly what is happening, because as what you are very articulately highlighted before, is Brookfield can claim success and we don't really have the true data to know.
That's right. And so, what our understanding is, and what Omega's understanding has further added to this discussion, is that Figure's Helix vision language model explicitly is designed for onboard zero-shot generalization across thousands of novel objects, which should structurally lower the teller operation floor versus prior robot generations and other architected generations. However, again, we also are true kind of students of this technology. The robotics literature consistently shows VLA and VLM systems requiring domain-specific adaptation for robust manipulation in novel industrial settings can sometimes struggle, and they need a continued intervention in teleoperations. And so Omega, combined with our understanding, believes that the most defensible projection here is that meaningful teleoperation burdens will likely persist in this early phases of the rollout, exceeding potentially 20% intervention rate. However, and that's all driven by the dynamic object edge cases and distribution shift from training data to actually being on the line. However, the key to watch is, does that intervention rate fall over time, and how quickly does it fall? And so it may be the case that we see in further reporting that estimated intervention rate is overestimated in this case. But without really seeing the details, and to be fair, this announcement was made yesterday, so we don't expect a lot of details, but one thing to monitor is kind of a signal within this larger commercial deal is what is that teleoperation burden early on versus what is it later on versus how quickly does it take to get that intervention rate down?
We don't know, but I'll say we would encourage Figure AI to make that data public, disclose it, because it's a really great benchmark, not just for Figure AI, but for the entire industry to truly understand how rapidly this technology is evolving. Because there's no doubt in my mind that humanoids are going to become part of daily lives. When do they get to the homes? Not going to give an estimation on there, but it's going to become part of daily lives in warehouses and other use cases. And eventually, I believe it's going to go to senior citizens' homes as well. And it'll be really helpful to have that data, because that data will help build public trust. Which brings us to Omega's take, Rob. Omega has a really great take on this here. Omega goes on to say, Figure AI has officially crossed the commercial Rubicon that separates R&D focused robotics startups from revenue generating enterprise vendors. The strategic advantage here extends far beyond the immediate revenue from Catalyst brands. It establishes a closed loop development ecosystem. If Figure proves its unit economics and reliability in the Reno facility, expect a rapid cascade of developments across Brookfield's massive global industrial and logistics portfolio. I agree on that take. When you go through the public filings of Brookfield's, they own a lot of real estate, and not to go back to the 90s, a lot of malls. And to go further back in time, Brookfield in Northern Virginia was operating Optimus Ride, if you remember that name from back in the day. And so they've been looking at autonomous vehicles, they've been looking at humanoids, and the company has a really great culture of leaning in to the future. So that's going to be something really interesting to watch there. So a good history lesson there from Omega on understanding where Brookfield's been.
100%. And look, success here not only could extend to the full portfolio within Brookfield and not only Catalyst, but also the Brookfield brands, but this is the leading edge of what is potentially a large shift in retail automation generally. If you can do this drop-in labor, whether it's sorting, packaging, folding, all sorts of things that happen just before you engage the customer, right? Whether that's at a warehouse, at in the back rooms, in the malls, at different parts in the journey of that product. And Figure is able to do this successfully here. They could really seek to capture a very large market before even some of their competitors get a chance to come in retail, right? We'll have to see what this forces or connects with Tesla's Optimus and Agility Robotics and Apptronic. Are they going to look for similar types of partnerships just so they can put a toehold in this retail space? And that'll be something interesting to watch over the next couple of quarters.
It'll be something interesting to watch. It's something that Omega will continue to watch. And if it unfolds correctly, as we're all rooting for and hoping for, Brookfield become a strategic partner, a strategic asset inside of Figure, opening those doors to their portfolio companies. So this brings us to signal number 2. Wayve and Stellantis have partnered for an L2++ system to be deployed here in the United States by 2028. Alex, sir, congratulations on the deal. I've been in the vehicle in London, as you know, and it performed really well. Happy to see this deal come to fruition, and very interesting that it is an L2++ deal. As you and I wrote in last week's newsletter, the rise of L2++ and personal ownership around the consumer having their own version of FSD is starting to become true, and I have to give a lot of credit to Stellantis' new management team for leaning into what the consumers want. So what did Omega uncover on this signal?
First of all, I love the development of this term L2++. This is great. I mean, I wish I had this in high school when I've got my C+. Maybe it could have been a C+++. It made my parents a little less angry at me. But here's the latest. So a little earlier this week, as you mentioned, Stellantis and UK-based Wayve announced a partnership to integrate Wayve's AI driver into Stellantis' AutoDrive platform, targeting a 2028 launch in North America. And while that sounds far off, folks, 2028 is 18 months from now, which is kind of crazy, only 6 quarters. So the system is designed to deliver, as we just mentioned, level 2++, which means hands-free, eyes-on supervised, automated driving using end-to-end embodied AI. It is a mapless, hardware agnostic, processing real-time camera data and bypassing expensive LiDAR sensors and pre-mapped HD roads. So that is really something to take note of here. This is very much along the Tesla full self-drive model and what we talked about that a couple weeks ago, and then we talked about Xpeng last week doing a similar kind of vision-only system. And so you're starting to see a really big pattern emerge here and another kind of front in the LiDAR versus no LiDAR ongoing battle that we've seen play out in this industry for over a decade. So further on this, the integration follows Wayve's $1.2 billion Series D funding round, which, by the way, was backed by Stellantis, but also notably backed by Uber and NVIDIA. One of the things that we learned and Omega learned in researching this process is that one of the big reasons for this deal, Wayve was able to demonstrate its plug and play viability by building a working prototype of its system on the Jeep Cherokee Stellantis platform in under 2 months. And I think that really impressed, from our understanding, Stellantis leadership, is just how quickly that could happen. And so, look, the idea here is that it is to be brought into all of Stellantis's brands within a couple of years, and that would be a real victory for Wayve.
It's a real victory for Wave, but I have to go back and heap more praise on Stellantis leadership and management team. Stellantis has been all over the map. Let's just be honest. It's been all over the map in automotive land. But it's always had a crown jewel, which is massively undervalued, is the Jeep brand. Now, well, all the signs point that Omega's uncovered, and the press photo points to it, the fact that they built it on a Jeep Cherokee. If Stellantis was to integrate, this is this because we do not have any data yet, integrate the Wave driver into the Jeep Grand Cherokee, you're going to have the revival of the 90s again. Remember how popular the Jeep Grand Cherokee was in the 90s? It was one of the best-selling SUVs. That could become a really big catalyst to relaunch and reintroduce that brand. So it's a very big deal for Stellantis. That's my opinion. What's Omega's take on this, Rob, why this is important?
Yeah, first of all, Jeep Grand Cherokee was the first vehicle I bought on my own out of law school, which is really interesting. And so I have a great affinity for it. It was, my vehicle, so to speak, as opposed to, getting help from my parents or my grandmother or anything like that. But Omega, why it matters and what Omega has found is, first of all, this partnership marks the first major OEM commitment to deploy, outside of Tesla, to deploy vision first mapless autonomy at scale in the US market. Um, and then, secondly, why it's important is that it will create potentially this massive data harvesting flywheel for both Wayve and Stellantis. So, right, if you go back and you eliminate these expensive sensor suites and the overhead of map maintenance, um, Wayve has the potential then to enable Stellantis's fleet, Jeep Grand Cherokee, and others to then have this technology on its vehicles. And without the need for maps, it then also removes the geographic bottleneck as well, right? Saying that you can deploy anywhere. Whereas we see with like GM's hands-off system, that it slowly is being rolled out as they map one highway after another highway after another highway after another highway. And so this is what leads to this potential massive data harvesting flywheel because Wave's end-to-end AI that will be deployed on these systems learns observationally rather than through hard-coded rules. So that requires an immense stream of edge case data. And having this technology on all or potentially all of Stellantis's models could solve this data bottleneck, turning millions of consumer vehicles into a global data harvesting fleet while generating licensing revenue years before level 4 autonomy is necessarily put into personally owned vehicles. And so I think this really has a potential to advantage Wave's development, but also Stellantis's customers at the same time.
And it could serve as a catalyst as Wayve continues on their L4 ambitions with the Uber announcement. We're going to hopefully see those vehicles with safety drivers Q4 in London. But if this goes the way that Tesla has gone, let's look at public numbers now. Tesla has disclosed that over 10 billion miles have been driven on FSD. GM on the Q1 earnings call disclosed 1 billion miles. The big difference, as you articulated, is that GM, you have to go on pre-mapped roads. Tesla, you can go anywhere. So in theory, looking at the Tesla model, Wayve is going to get paid, which is great as a business, and they're going to get all this extra data, which could then, in theory, accelerate their L4 robotaxi. And if that does happen, again, in theory, it validates what Elon Musk has been saying for years. Get the naysayers or the poo-pahers or any term you want to use. It validates it. And then on the Stellantis side, it gives Stellantis a direct competitor to FSD. And oh, by the way, I did own a Jeep Grand Cherokee as well, so I knew I liked you. It gives them a direct competitor because I believe at some point in the future, every major global OEM is going to have an FSD competitor in order to truly compete with Tesla, just because that's where the market's heading.
I agree. And we saw this, right, a couple weeks ago when we talked about BYD and their ability. Now, they are using a LiDAR-based system, right, for their L2 version, but their version was priced so affordably that we had to take notice. And so you see this real battle for consumers and how to get this technology, this L2++ technology into their hands. But what I also find really fascinating about this particular deal is that I think it's an admission, by Stellantis, a major OEM, one of the big three here, that it cannot do this transition to L2++ through its own organic investments. It has to go out and license this technology. It has to go out in order to compete. And I think, to your point, that is one of the big takeaways from the change in leadership at Stellantis. It is an admission of where they are strong and an admission of where they think they can compete, and an admission of where they think they can't compete and how they're going to make up those gaps. And they are not making up this gap on autonomy internally. They have given up and said, we are looking for outside technology to give us a boost. And I think that's really interesting because, as others have talked about, and as I think we've referenced a few times before, you're starting to see this admission by more and more Western OEMs. And in this particular case, right, beyond just looking to the UK-based Wayve, we know that Stellantis is looking at opening its factories, its dormant factories or below production level factories, to Leap Motors, which they have an investment in, which is a Chinese manufacturer. And so it is not only about the autonomy technology, it's also about potentially the underlying vehicle as well. And it's an admission that in car manufacturing and in the autonomous development of personally owned vehicles, Western OEMs are feeling the heat. Some of them are saying we cannot catch up. We are in the race so far behind that we need assistance to even get to a point where we're still even considered in the picture for the race. Not that we're going to win the race necessarily, but to even be in the picture. And so I think this is another reason why this is so important, and why I think it's really interesting. The new leadership at Stellantis, the Filosa's partnership-driven strategy here is really fascinating moment in time, and a really good signal for us to share with our audience.
It's a great signal. You're right. It went from the we're going to build everything in house to the like you said, we're behind to this partnership model. With partnership models, inherently comes risk. You and I both know that from our careers, which Omega has the risk factors here. In general, the Stellantis Wayve partnership represents a high-stakes, high-risk architectural bet on unproven mapless AI technology by a financially pressured automaker. The attempt to scale this end-to-end embodied AI across a massive legacy vehicle portfolio within a highly compressed 2-year timeline creates severe technical execution and financial vulnerabilities. That's true, and I'll add to that, cultural issues. because you got to get the culture on board to implement this. So it's going to be something to watch. That's a really big risk there to highlight.
For sure. And I really think, of those risks, right? There is a precarious potential misalignment of timelines and risk tolerance here that Omega is touching on. Look, Stellantis needs quick wins to justify Filosa's turnaround strategy, while Wayve needs patient capital to prove its mapless approach. But given that Stellantis has already abandoned level 3 autonomy due to cost concerns, betting on an even less proven technology stack indicates a bit of a desperation play here on Stellantis' part. And I don't mean to say anything negative about Wayve. I think they're doing some great work. I think it has really great potential. The things I saw in person when they're on the road, or whether it's here in California or in London, the 60 Minutes interview, which I thought went really well, and they did a really good job. Alex did a really good job in that interview last weekend. The potential is really great, but it still needs more proving out. And so Stellantis betting big on them is a risk in itself, not so much because I think Wayve is a risk, but because what Wayve is attempting to do has not yet been proven. And so ultimately, right, when financially stressed OEMs, of which Stellantis is clearly one, makes kind of big architectural bets on startups under compressed timelines, there is really great structural risk in that. But, as I've seen many times in many different flavors, in many different industries, sometimes you have to take the big bet, and that big bet pays off. And so I think, given everything facing Stellantis, this makes a lot of sense, even though it carries a lot of risk. And I think from Wayve's standpoint, this also carries risks, but it's also worth the potential to get into a major OEM and become maybe that licensor of choice, where they become, in essence, the tier one supplier to many OEMs of their L2++ technology. I think each instance brings a large amount of risk, but I think from the different standpoints of both companies, these risks make sense. But it is these are big bets by each company. These are not small moves on either side, and those moves, at least particularly in Stellantis's perspective, are needed because they are falling far behind others in this race to stay relevant with personal owned vehicle manufacturing.
You could make the argument very harshly. It's make or break for both companies. If it succeeds, they win. If it doesn't succeed, it's a lot of questions. And Omega highlights this, which I alluded to earlier, was the engineering integration risk. Stellantis faces a massive engineering challenge in seamlessly integrating new camera and sensor hardware across its fragmented, it's very important to highlight that, fragmented, 14 brand vehicle architecture in time for the aggressive 2028 launch window. Goes back to culture. And then potential, I'm just saying this, but you and I talk a lot about policy. You might have potential union pushback as well on this.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It'll be interesting to see, given what we know of the integration, we understand it's going to start with the Jeep Grand Cherokee, which is a very popular North American model. So we anticipate that its rollout will initially be in the US markets. However, we did talk about its partnership with Leap Motors in China, and kind of investigating use of its European factories to build more of the Leap Motor Chinese-based vehicles, including this technology on it. So I am really fascinated to see, given potential union concerns, given concerns over about proving kind of mapless, LiDAR-less technology, right? Tesla is under great scrutiny in a lot of places, particularly in the US, where they decide to put their focus on this partnership. Will it remain in North America? Will it pivot to Europe? And if it does pivot to Europe, as we've mentioned before, you again see that potential of the Chinese interplay here in Europe. And so I think all these signals are really important for the folks that listen to us to keep ahead of, to understand where technologies might succeed or might be placed first, where they might show growth, where they might want to at least dip a toehold in to claim a piece of the stake. And so I think this is going to be fascinating to watch, given the big bets kind of each has made to each other, and this union is really potentially a really great one, or potentially one that is super fragile.
There's a lot of questions that remain. It's something that we're going to watch, and then we'd be remiss if we didn't say there's the vision only debate. So that's something to watch, as well as the technology scales, and most importantly, when it gets into the hands of consumers. Which brings us to Omega's take. Omega's got a really great take on this partnership. The Stellantis Wayve deal signals that the entrenchment of a two-track autonomy market, expensive geofence robotaxi fleets, i.e. Waymo, versus affordable generalized consumer ADAS, i.e. Tesla. It's an interesting take there, because as it goes back to, I call it a game of ping pong. There, it's like the market's divided, and you have religions on both sides. And then there's folks like you and I in the middle that are looking at this broadly. What do you make of Omega's take there?
I think it's very salient and very smart. We are kind of seeing this growing divide between how do we take technology and get it into the hands of consumers fastest and with the most trust. And you have your kind of L4 pure play operators like Waymo that are not offering an L2 system for licensing. I believe at one point, Waymo will try to offer an L4 system that you can license. Now, will they struggle in that offering if L2 seems to be what consumers grow comfortable with? Will L4 be seen as purely something for a fleet type operation, given the unique insurance concerns, the unique maintenance, electrification, cleaning concerns, things of that nature. And we talk to a lot of fleet operators, right? Who are in that business because they don't see it necessarily as one where individuals will be able to offer their individual car out into a fleet. That just doesn't seem to be like the Airbnb of robotaxi fleets. Seems like there are too many people who are looking to play in that space right now, and that should tell us something. But will consumers say, I'm pretty good sitting behind the wheel myself with my hands off and the car driving itself? Like, for me, that's enough. And, is it something that consumer preference will show that L2++ is where they're more comfortable at rather than L4? And so I do think this bifurcated market is going to be really interesting. And I think further, it'll be interesting to see if any of these, like Wayve itself, started out L4 focus and now we're doing L2++, right? So they're playing in both. Will others attempt to play in both, right? Will we see Zoox, partner with somebody to say, what, we're building L4, but we can also provide you an L2++. Will we see AutoBrains or Vern or some of these foreign players who are playing in this space attempt the same thing, right? As we've just talked about, as Europe is seen as this kind of multicultural, maybe we have Stellantis, a Chinese manufacturer, and an Israeli supplier all together. So it's going to be interesting as consumers start to vote with their pocketbooks what they want.
It's going to be interesting. And to the naysayers, friend of the show, David Moss, is currently, I texted me about an hour ago, he's roughly 900 miles from going cross country in Canada without touching the wheel once, which is impressive. And Mr. Moss has already gone across the United States, not touched the wheel. And I don't know how Mr. Moss supervises the car so much, David. I don't know how the heck you do it, buddy. I couldn't sit in a car that long, but he's Mr. Endurance safety observer. He does it. And so it's proven that the technology works. We're seeing an uptick in FSD conversion based on Tesla's last quarterly filings in Q1. So that market's starting to go. And Omega points out the biggest beneficiary, the biggest winner in this is NVIDIA, because you need all that compute to power all these systems. And so that to me, it seems like, okay, you put a bow on it. Once again, Jensen's at the center of this.
I'm always amazed, right? And NVIDIA is the sun in this galaxy, it seems. Just things are always in its gravitational pull. And yes, right, we mentioned earlier, NVIDIA is an investor um, in Wayve, I believe. And so, um, you know, having NVIDIA, the need for NVIDIA to handle all this edge computing in these LiDAR-less, mapless, end-to-end systems just goes without saying. I don't know. I just shake my head. I always see NVIDIA in there. May not be where we start the conversation, but they're always included in the conversation.
They're always included, and I just want to highlight, and it's a galaxy that's not far, far away. It's a galaxy that's here today. So just have to qualify that. I love it going back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, all over the map today. Which brings us to Signal 3. The founders of Skype, they started a thing called the Venice Project, became Juiced, and then unfortunately that didn't go anywhere. It's inside baseball on that and music stuff. But then they started a company called Starship Technologies for autonomous delivery bots. And the company recently announced they passed 10 million fully autonomous deliveries in the little sidewalk bots. That's impressive. What signals did Omega uncover with that announcement?
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit more about what they shared with everybody just a few weeks ago about this kind of really big milestone. I mean, 10 million is a lot of deliveries, right? So the company Starship Technologies described the milestone as a turning point for so-called physical AI systems operating in real-world environments. And they have robots. They claim 3,000 autonomous robots operating across more than 300 locations in 8 countries, including the US and several European markets. In total, their release on this announcement said the fleet has traveled over 22 million kilometers autonomously and completed approximately 200 million road crossings. They say the companies perform more than 125,000 road crossings per day, roughly 2 per second, all operating at L4 autonomy without active human supervision. And so one of the key signals out of this is Starship is framing autonomous delivery as a potential shift in economics of the last mile logistics. So Starship Technology says autonomous delivery is already $3 to $4 cheaper than traditional rider-based delivery models, with a long-term target of around $1 per drop. That's the total cost per drop. So they're already $3 to $4 cheaper, but they're looking at getting the total cost for delivery down to $1. And this is bolstered by some external research done by Barclays as well, that autonomous delivery could unlock an estimated $16 billion in annual profitability globally. And so this operational maturity, so to speak, provides a critical benchmark for the broader autonomous delivery robot economy. And I think the signal here that Omega highlights with high conviction is that this milestone is proving that repeated paid autonomous operations are viable today. And that's always a sign and a signal to take note of, right? Autonomous commercial operations that have long-term durability and viability is a real important signal both to take note of and to take notice of.
And when you look at the economics that Starship has publicly provided, it says, aha, now I understand why DoorDash Labs wants to build and scale Dot. It seems like it's all there. Then I'll plug the road to autonomy. Ali, the co-founder and CEO of Serve Robotics, is coming on again. So we're going to have a deep dive in that. But it seems that the sidewalk delivery bot is on the verge of becoming a business here.
Yeah, very much so, right? And I think what's really interesting is that in this release, Starship Technologies directly takes on kind of the gig model economics. And it's saying that their ability to do this in a manner that makes customers happy. So the food or the product is arriving on time, good quality control, um, with not too much additional hassle to retrieve the product or anything like that. That it's lightweight, kind of robotic form factors are able to be produced and manufactured at scale and then deployed in all sorts of circumstances, right? Both good circumstances and bad, being able to navigate stairs and sidewalks that aren't perfect, and humans and vehicles on the roads and sidewalks, bikes and e-scooters and all of that. Um, that it's also saying that not only I can manufacture this at scale, that I can deliver a product that the consumers enjoy, but that my um, technical capabilities, my sensor and compute architecture is able to be done at a cost that enables rapid, efficient scaling as well. And so all of these aspects have to come into play, have to be matured, and have to maintain themselves in order to run a profitable commercial autonomous delivery system. And what Starship Technologies is signaling to us is that they are there, that they are achieving these things, and that not only can they do that successfully today, but they can be better at it tomorrow as well.
And they're operating at a 99% autonomous. There's that 1% edge case, which could get expensive, which we're going to break down here in the risks. But no matter what, they're truly scaling, and we don't have insight into the revenue, not publicly disclosed, but based on all the metrics that they provided publicly, it's starting to grow into a nice sized business, which brings us to the risks. Omega says, in general, Starship's primary risk is scaling further is overcoming the teleportation tax. Even at 99% autonomy, you still have that 1%, which is a tax, and hyper-fragmented municipal regulations, although those could be tricky, that threaten unit economics outside of dense controlled campus environments. Putting on your policy hat here, how difficult is it going to be as they start to go into more and more municipalities as there's this growing movement of take the sidewalk back?
Yeah, this is probably, I think, one of the more difficult aspects in this particular business model. One, there is a long history of municipal regulation of its sidewalks, right? There has been, precedents going back many, many, many years. If you're in the East Coast, centuries, in fact, and if you're operating in Boston or New York or Philadelphia. Similarly, even the newer cities out west, right? The municipalities also claim kind of jurisdiction over the sidewalk. Um, and so being able to elevate yourself out of that municipal um, progress, right? Going city by city. And it's not just major cities, right? It's every municipality. So you're talking from the small university city council in Altoona, Pennsylvania, all the way to the large mayor run systems in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. You have to approach each one separately. And I think last time I checked, there are approximately about 4,000 municipalities in the United States. The Commonwealths break them down differently. So if you're anyone here from Pennsylvania, I understand you've got about literally within Pennsylvania, you have about 5,000 different jurisdictional levels that you could get to. But in general, if you're just going kind of at the county level, you have about 5,000 or 4,000 in the United States. Um, and that means you have to repeat this process over and over again, and you may not wind up with consistent rules. You may wind up being blocked because, Sam, who runs the hardware store down, for the last 50 years, he doesn't like sidewalk robots. And there's really nothing you can do about it. Right. And so you kind of get sometimes bogged down in these very local issues. And he may not like it because he wants to set up his wheelbarrows out front, and that's what people come by. And he has to clear the sidewalk to let the delivery robot go. He might lose sales of his wheelbarrow. So I'm not saying Sam, in this case, has anything untoward about his dislike of sidewalk robots. It's just maybe that he thinks it interferes with his business. But if you have 4,000 SAMs to get through, that's a lot harder than if you have potentially only 50 SAMs to get through if you're dealing with state by state regulation, right? It's one of the reasons why um, ride sharing back in the early day, we went and very much deliberately elevated ourselves out of municipal regulation. We were getting crushed. Some of the first things I ever did was at the municipal level. I was in the city council in Miami, and then in Tampa Hillsborough, and then in Madison, Wisconsin, and South Bend, Indiana. All these places fighting at this very municipal level, and meeting some interesting characters along the way. And so we were just like, no matter how much money we had, 4,000 of these battles is just tough to get through. And so we wanted to elevate, and thankfully the roads are not always subject to municipal regulation. We elevated ourselves out by creating a new definition of transportation network company and saying that should be regulated at the state level rather than at the municipal level. So I think this is a very real tax. Now, that being said, Starship Technologies has been at this for a while. So this is not like they're starting on day one. There is a playbook I'm sure they have to how to address municipal concerns. There is probably an overlaying map that says what are the types of municipalities that others look to. So if you can get Los Angeles County, for instance, to support you, you're much more likely to get, San Diego County and Orange County and others in the similar area to say, well, if LA did it, I should be able to do it as well. But it's a very difficult thing to do. So I really do think this is one of the hardest parts that lays ahead, even if you have technically and operationally managed to perfect your system, which we talked about just previously. This municipal tax, so to speak, or burden is a very steep one. And I know Starship's on its way to getting it done, but it's a long process.
It's a long process, and I mean, I don't know if they have preemption in it, but you are always going to run into those issues. And as they expand offside of campuses into cities, so that you gave the regulatory, but then you also have utilization rates risk. Because Omega goes on to say the immediate operational bottleneck for Starship is maintaining high utilization rates as it expands beyond hyperdense college campuses. Moving into standard suburban or urban residential grids dramatically increases the distance per trip. If daily volumes per robot drop, the capital expenditure required to build and maintain the hardware cannot be profitably amortized, threatening their target of $1 per drop economics. So we're not even factoring in the cost to hire lobbyists and all the policy people. We're just looking at simple math here. It seems that there's a lot of risk there that Omega is highlighting.
For sure. And, I think a lot of autonomous industries have this utilization issue as a primary concern. Um, it is expensive to run and maintain and to have these uh, vehicles out on the road. And in particular, I think, right, these vehicles, particularly these sidewalk robots, are prone to being knocked over or vandalized or things like that. And I think they have a playbook for how to reduce that, right? Some of them have anthropomorphized the robot by putting googly eyes on, which I love. I just think that's great. Um, Others have put colorful stickers on them, advertising, forming a relationship with the brand that many people like Coca-Cola or something like that. Um, so I do think utilization is always a central metric to monitor when it comes to autonomous commercial systems. And in this case, it'll be interesting to see in these geographic areas that are much more spread out, that aren't as dense, that don't have the kind of customer per mile as, say, a campus would, right? You have tens of thousands of college students in an area. They get hungry late at night, right? They get hungry on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, whatever the night is to go out, or on a football game day or whatever. You get out to more of these traditional family area suburbs that are much more spread out, like many of the suburbs, say in Phoenix, or many of the suburbs outside of Chicago, right? Where the suburbs just seem to go on forever, right? I mean, you got people in Naperville telling you they're from Chicago, and it's like 20 miles away from downtown Chicago. It's crazy. Um, and so it becomes a little bit harder economics and the utilization, meaning how many orders are they getting, how often are they out there, how quickly can they turn around the robot from one order to the next, becomes a challenge. I do think it is a challenge that can be overcome, but it takes some real sophistication and logistics and planning to do that. And my guess is Starship, Coco, Serve, others, and we can ask the CEO of Serve when he's on, how how do you anticipate solving those kind of logistical challenges as you get out of those more dense urban environments?
And then there's the structural risk of human teleoperators. Omega goes on to say structurally the reliance on human teleoperators for edge cases such as construction zones or off-leash dogs creates a persistent cost center. Even at 99% autonomy, this teleportation tax means labor costs simply shift from gig workers on bikes to remote operators and control centers. Competitors, including Serve Robotics, are aggressively targeting the same lucrative markets, meaning Starship must solve this margin compression quickly to defend its volume leadership. Because Omega's right. It's not just one delivery bot. When you go to Miami and you Brickley, you see 2 or 3 different competitors going down the sidewalks.
I mean, first of all, I'm always a huge fan of competition. I think competition is good for consumers. It's good for innovation as well. It forces you to innovate. And I think my sense is this is an area where innovation can help, right? That as your, whether it's vision systems or lidar based systems, whatever you're using, get better. They can anticipate different edge cases and know how to react to them or avoid them altogether, which is the priority here. But you can also innovate. Like, how do you get a turned over robot to right itself, right? How might you be able to get a robot that has encountered a pothole out of a pothole without needing teleoperations? I think these are things that can be innovated their way out of. And I know a few of the people that work at these companies, and they're engineers and they're very smart. And I know they're working on some of these things. So I think it's a combination of operational and financial innovation as well, but also literally technical innovation.
It's going to happen. And a common denominator for a lot of these companies, not all companies, I want to highlight that, is Magna. Magna is one of the world's greatest contract manufacturers. And Magna's building all these bots. And so if you look at Magna's history of engineering prowess, they're probably going to figure it out, which brings us to Omega's take. I'll say it to this way. Omega put a bow on everything here for us, Rob. Omega goes on to say the autonomy economy's first true commercial scale is happening on the sidewalk, not the street. While institutional capital remains heavily concentrated on the $1 to $2 trillion passenger robotaxi total addressable market, Starship's 10 million delivery milestone confirms that constrained operational design domains combined with lightweight hardware offer the fastest path to human economics. However, investors and logistics operators must recognize that last mile robotic delivery is highly vulnerable to municipal pushback and edge case labor cost. While Starship leads in volume today, its path to sustained profitability requires driving the teleoperator intervention rate to near zero while navigating city by city lobbying. It summed it all up.
It did. I love it. I love that it put it together, and it did so in a way that is just right there to digest, inject in your brain, take away something from this conversation today, and apply it to what you need to tomorrow.
Absolutely, and that brings us to the close. Each and every Thursday, Rob and I will be here breaking down the signals in the autonomy economy. As you know, for our listeners, they're vast, they're wide, and if you're interested in learning more about Omega, a proprietary AI which powers the show, or if you're interested in having Rob and I assist you with your business of navigating the autonomy economy, please send an email to alpha@autnmy.ai. That's alpha@autnmy.ai. The future is bright, the future is autonomous, the future is profitability. Rob, another great show on the books, sir.
I loved it, especially reminiscing about the mall in the 90s. That was my hangout.
And don't forget about Spencer Gist and the Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Billions and soon trillions in value will be created in the autonomy economy. By the time a trend becomes consensus, the alpha is already gone. The gap between uncovering signals and reading headlines is widening fast. When it's a headline, it's no longer a signal. Enter Autonomy AI. We decode signals before they move markets, giving you conviction in the autonomy economy. Autonomy AI, your models, our intelligence. Visit AUTNMY.ai.